Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation of Township of Wilson, January 5th, 2023. I will start with roll call. Councillor Goyda.
Present.
Councillor Spoulos.
Present.
Councillor Bailey
Here.
and Councillor Russell Hurst. Gosh. Even in Councillor Roth, I always call him the wrong name. All right, we will begin our moment of reflection. Okay, that concludes our moment of reflection. We have the confirmation of the agenda, please, Ms. Whitefox.
The council approves the January 5th, 2023 agenda as circulated, and the council approves and receives the addition to the agenda as follows. Questions received from council seeking additional information and the corresponding responses provided by staff.
All right, can I get a move for that, please? Councillor Spoulos, second by Councillor Hurst. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Councillor Hurst, did you raise your hand? I didn't see it. That's from monitor. Okay, carried. All right, do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none. All right, just before we dive into reports, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge our staff. It's come to my attention that some of our public works or park staff modified their work schedule. And they worked evenings or midnights in order to get the outdoor rink up and running again for residents and our rentals to be used. And I was quite surprised to hear that coming in today, seeing that the weather's been quite warm for several days. So just a shout out to the staff for being flexible and changing their shift schedule during these holiday times and making that happen for the public. It's very much appreciated. So once that's done, I will just move on to reports. I believe we have Ms. Hassan, and you're going to give us a overview of this report.
Yes, council. Thanks, Mayor. So I'm just
Mary.
starting. Sorry, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
And now,
Excellent. So just a quick overview of the report. I'm actually on page 2 of 60 of the agenda package. There's some recommendations for council's indulgence on the first page that we can go over later on. The second page just discusses what the purpose of the report is, and it's to provide the proposed operating budget, which is included as Schedule A to the report, and a summary of the budget is included as Schedule B to this report. So this report is just focusing on the operating budget. The capital budget was already provided to council at the December 7th capital budget meeting. There was some direction provided by council at that meeting that will be incorporated in the budget update report for the January 18th council meeting. There's some information in the report regarding the CPI inflationary trends. This is similar information that staff reported to council regarding as part of our user fees and charges bylaw report. And so the significant inflation projected from 2021 and 2022 has been incorporated in the 2023 proposed budget on specific line items that the township is aware that inflation has impacted, such as fuel, insurance, and calcium. On page 4 of the agenda, it discusses basically our approach around the proposed base operating budget. And the proposed base operating budget includes adjustments for previous and current year actual. So a lot of our line items are averages of the previous years, taking into account the current year-to-date figures. The base operating budget also includes unavoidable documented base budget increases, and a lot of these are due to the CPI inflationary trends that we're noticing that are impacting municipalities all over Ontario. So you'll notice that there are some increases in the proposed budget as it relates to fuel, insurance, calcium, and there's also other increases that will be discussed later on in the report. And then the base operating budget also includes council-approved new projects, initiatives, and service levels that were approved throughout 2022 that weren't incorporated in the 2022 proposed budget. So we've provided some of the trending in the budget into 3 different categories, and all 3 of these categories are incorporated in the base operating budget. So one of the categories are mandated internally through council approved policy or previous council direction. So those are all noted on page 5 of the report. Sorry, page 5 of the agenda package. Page 6 of the agenda package discusses the changes to the budget from the 2022 budget due to mandated externally factors such as items through legislation or other agencies or current economic trends. Some of these include fuel, calcium, Conservation Authority levy payments, the mandatory increases to employee benefit contribution rates, and the Ontario minimum wage rate. On page 6 of the agenda package also includes recommendations by township staff. As you can see in this table, there are decreases in specific budget line items that have been noted, and those are incorporated in this section of the report. There's one increase in vehicle maintenance costs and fire and rescue services, and that's based on previous year actuals and the aging fleet in that department. The bottom of page 6 of the agenda package discusses proposed operating base budget increase requests. These are due to new projects, initiatives, or service levels and governing legislation which have not been previously approved by council. And these include a BBI form, so a base budget increase form. And this is in accordance with our budget development and control policy. So these requests have been reviewed by both the CAO and myself prior to being presented to council. Page 7 of the report discusses these base budget increases. If there's any specific technical questions about the base budget increases, department heads can answer them, but the financial implications are incorporated on this page of the report. As you can see, there's a one-time base budget increase and a few proposed permanent base budget increases. On the bottom of page 7 of the agenda package, we discussed the Cambridge Fire Services contract and whether council would like to phase in an additional amount as part of the 2023 proposed budget. The 2023 proposed budget only incorporates the amounts that were approved in 2019 and 2020, which amount to $48,000. Page 8 of the report discusses what the 2022 approved budget was for contributions to our discretionary reserves and what the 2023 proposed budget is for contributions to discretionary reserves. It includes both operating discretionary reserves and capital discretionary reserves, so council has the full picture here. So some of our capital discretionary reserves include asset management, information technology, gravel roads improvement, and the aggregate levy. So that's a quick summary of the report. As I indicated, Schedule A includes the detailed operating budget. Schedule B includes the summary, and Schedule C includes the proposed base budget increases, which have been prepared by department heads for their respective cost centers. I'm done with my quick summary.
Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Sand. So I would suggest that we just go right to page 41 of the agenda package. This is the first base budget increase form, if everybody's comfortable with that. And that is the $3,000 for some gardening. Now, I don't know if Mr. Fowler would like to speak to that briefly prior to council discussing it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yes, so this $3,000, it's a one-time ask just to get the Millennium Garden up and improved for the 2023 season. It entails basically establishing new plants and foliage, topsoil, mulching once the plants are established in the ground. And I did receive direction to inquire about reestablishing the current underground sprinkler system. Quotes I have received are around the $2,000 mark for various components and sensors for the unit. That this would also include opening up in the spring and winterizing in the fall. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Councilor Goida?
I don't have any questions, just some comments. Do you want me to do those now? Yeah, I actually took a walk through that garden just before I came here today. I am supportive of the $3,000. I think that garden sees a lot of foot traffic, especially now that the parking for the school is here at the PCC. I think many parents and children walk through there on a daily basis just to go to the school, and I think also probably to the Aberfoyle Farmers Market. I think it is a good example of volunteerism in the township, and I think that by contributing, it shows that we are supporting volunteerism, and it reflects well on the township. So I'm supportive of spending the money, but I did want to ask or perhaps suggest that since this is a one-time expense and not something that's expected to recur every year, and since it does seem that we will likely have a surplus, that rather than this coming out of the operating levy, that it be funded by the surplus instead. Those are my thoughts on that particular item.
Councilor Schools?
Yes, I also did a walkthrough at the insistence of one other councillor. I noticed there were some rocks that were out of position in there. But this budget also take care of the stones in the wall that are been knocked out or whatever the case have been.
Yes, the consideration to replace the mortar with some of the stones. I also expect some of that money would go toward replacing some of the interlock brick that have heaved over the years. So yes, that would be included within that price.
Question of finance people, can this be funded out of our part-time dedication fees?
Mr. Sam?
I have to look into what the act says about because this, I believe, is like a maintenance cost and not a capital. So I'll have to look into what the act says.
So I would support it be either funded from the surplus that we have, as Councilor Boyd has mentioned, in 2022, or from the parkland reserve if that's available.
Any further comments?
No, I'm good.
Councilor Bailey?
Thank you. I am in support of spending the 3,000 on it. Like Councilor Goida said, I think it's showing support to volunteers that are already starting to kind of come out of the woodwork and ready to get that garden back in place. And so this just shows the support that from the township side, and there is a bit of partnership. So we'll have the volunteers and the staff working together to help bring this back to its pristine park.
Councilor Hurst?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the only follow-up question I would have would be in terms of the sprinkler system. My understanding was this is a one-time cost, but would there be other annual setup and decommissioning costs moving forward? I'm assuming there would be with a sprinkler system.
Yes, you're correct. In the previous years, we've just paid for the commissioning and decommissioning through our parkland maintenance account. So the majority of the expenditure will be the actual repair and components required to get it back up and running.
Thanks for the clarity. No, I'm in support.
Mr. Fowler, do you have a budget line at your disposal for other gardens within the municipality so that after 23 you would be able to, dress up other flower beds in the municipality?
I currently don't have a dedicated GL account for that type of work. What I do try each year is to maintain what I need to maintain through our parks maintenance budget, and any surplus that's remaining is dedicated to flower beds, planters, or establishing new landscape beds in front of the new signage that we've erected at our various parks.
Is there any plans in the future to add any beds beneath the new branding signs that we have at our parks?
Yes, there currently is. That will be at this time contingent on any funds that are surplus throughout the year.
So I would like to make a suggestion that we leave it in the operating budget. As we all know, there's a lot of balls in the air for where we're going to land on increases. That way, this first year, they can focus on the Millennial Garden. This will give the Director of Public Works a budget line to, add flower bed. There's one that Mr. Fowler, you'd be able to remind me when you did the front of the PCC here. But there are some beds that need maintenance, and it's basically been budgeted through, some leftover monies from other budget lines. So if we have the capability to wait and leave this in the operating budget for now, till we get the final numbers, that's what I would like council to consider. So, Mr. Goida.
Yeah, I would be okay with that. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of balls in the air. We don't exactly know where things are gonna land. So it, maybe something we have to talk about again at our next budget meeting, but for now, I'm okay.
Councilor Spruce.
I'm okay, leaving the final decision, which part comes from, at the next meeting.
Councilor Bailey.
No, I'm happy with that.
Okay. Do you need further direction from that? Anyone, staff? That's fine. Okay. I believe the next one is page 43, the Heritage Advisory Committee. Is there anybody here to speak to that one? Or is- You can help?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's pretty straightforward. Did you want to give a little synopsis about it, or the?
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a request from the Heritage Committee that's come about from the last term. And it's a request to attend the National Trust Conference as a second approved conference for the Heritage Committee members. So just within the base budget increase, it lays out what the training costs are. Again, it is a conference that requires travel and accommodation. So those are also laid out in the base budget increase form as well.
I maybe put the CAO on the spot here, but would you be able to speak to what value conferences bring, or what they possibly could bring back from that conference if we support that? From my understanding, this might be more of a national register, or is there going to be enough local content that this is worthy of us to send members?
I can't speak to the content of this particular workshop or conference that they're speaking of, but in terms of general comments, there's always good value in people going to attend items like this so that they can see what others are doing elsewhere, see what things have been implemented successfully or things that didn't work somewhere, so that they can take that knowledge and spread it here, so that the committee isn't kind of reinventing the wheel every time they're trying something here. They basically build on the successes of other groups. That's a good way to do that.
Councilor Wood?
Yeah, I support this. I just was wondering if, like some of these other conferences with COVID, they have switched to having virtual options. And I was just wondering if this particular conference had an opportunity to attend virtually to cut down on at least the cost associated with the travel and the accommodation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that this conference did, but certainly if there are opportunities like that, then we would be encouraging virtual attendance.
I support one person going out too. I think one person can go and bring back the necessary information. I hear what the mayor said, that this is a national conference, and I'm concerned that it might be too broad in nature. It's like us attending the conference for the big cities of Canada And there's very little local content. We concentrate ourselves on AMO and Roma. So I'm wondering, this is, might be too much, too big, sophisticated cities have bigger issues than what we have. So I'm okay with one as opposed to two. And I sort of tie it into the next item where we're talking about posters and using the money from, the posters to pay for this person. So, I think if we approve one, selling of the posters will also allow to pay for this individual, so we don't see a budget increase associated with somebody going on this conference.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, Councillor Spose. I originally was very supportive of this. I think with a lot of the changes coming from Bill 23 in terms of heritage, there's probably a lot of things out there that are a lot of unknowns, and this might be a really great way for people to bounce ideas off each other and kind of learn what's coming down the pipes. Tagging on to your idea, though, perhaps this is something where we send one person and get some feedback on what the conference is actually like and whether it is, you know, relative to our local area, and then see if there's an ask for two for next year kind of idea. I'm fine phasing, you know, doing it sort of a phased approach.
Councillor Hurst?
I agree with the prior comments. I think there's a lot up in the air currently within the Heritage Committee. I think in terms of the provincial regulations, legislation and transition. So I think it's important that they're supported, and if one person can go to a national conference, I would encourage that and have them share their lessons learned from their peer group, as Glenn noted. As somebody that is appointed to the Heritage Committee, I'm looking forward to it. I'd certainly would like to hear a report back from the attendee as to the value. I think that would guide further budget decisions too.
Thank you. For me, depending on budget, this was one of the items that I thought we might not be able to support depending on where we landed, but I feel that if we send two, there's what you're doing. I'm hoping the intention is that you're training two people so that if one leaves, the knowledge doesn't leave with them. So I look at it as, you know, for a minor amount of investment, we're ensuring that we have continuity across the Heritage Committee. So and I don't know if this should even play a part of the decision making, but sending a couple of our Heritage Committee people to Ottawa, one on their own, maybe they need the support, or navigating Ottawa and working through the conference. It's pretty overwhelming. Trust me, when you go by yourself and you're trying to figure things out, it is nice to have that support network and some assistance there. So I'm still supportive of leaving this in as well until we see more numbers, because what would be the difference of sending one? Who would answer that? Sam. What would be the difference between sending one member versus two?
Yeah, well, I think they were gonna carpool, so 1 second.
I would entertain sending two, and then if we get a report back that, I don't know, anybody would come back and report back that they didn't see value in a conference, but again, at this point, could we possibly leave it in until we see? I'll ask you another question, Mrs. Sam, once you're done with that one. Do you know when we'll see the final growth numbers so that we can make more concrete decisions?
January 18th council meeting.
So is that 13 days? What's council's thoughts on, again, my comments? Councilor Goyda?
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. And I guess if it's only a marginal additional cost to send a second person, I mean, I understand entirely. I just, if we're in a position where we need to really pinch some pennies, then I think that this is a good way to do it. I only send one person and just seeing how it goes. And then if next year it is a valuable experience, then we send two. But I'm also super okay with just waiting until we know where the assessment growth lands. And look at this decision again.
Councilor Spose?
I like to go with a converse, go with one person right now in the budget, and then if it works out, add it in at that time.
I'd like to do the opposite. I'd like to put it in as a placeholder, and then if we have to pinch some numbers later, then that's something we can pull out.
We want to carve that out and do it separately.
Counselor Hurst?
I'm in support of Counselor Baylor's position on that one. I think that's prudent in my mind. It's a nice to do, not a necessity. So my-
Sorry, your favorite Counselor Spools or Bailey?
Bailey.
Bailey, and you were supportive of both?
Yeah.
So it's two for sure. So procedurally, you seem to have a little bit of different opinions here, which is fine. How would you like to see that hashed out?
Mr. Mayor, I see the writing on the wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to respect everybody's.
I understand. The writing says.
We have another kick at the can on the
Yes.
18th, so. We're gonna be done in 45 minutes.
Jinx it.
All right, this is the, sorry, I'm the same. Yeah, is that another one from the Heritage Advisory Committee, right?
Yes.
And do you want to speak to that one? Oh, it's the door ministers, yes.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, this request is coming from the Heritage Committee. They've prepared a proposal form with our secretary of the committee, and this is relating to the Doors of Puslinch poster that we have. Some may be familiar with it. It is hanging in the clerk's department in our office and throughout the community as it was circulated and purchased in the past, I believe. So it's a photo of Puslinch doors, recognizable ones relating to heritage structures. And the committee would like to take on the task of printing those posters and selling them. So we have tried to estimate what the sales would be over a 5-year period of time and realistically what would be sold within that time frame. So that's what the base budget increase form reflects. And so again, this is an initiative that staff will be assisting the committee with that aims to sell and make a small profit on the poster sales.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I've seen this poster. It's in the library as well. I'm sure it will do quite well. I support this for sure.
Mr. Spools?
Yeah, I support a condition council. The council gets a lot first dibs on some first one.
Didn't have any extra benefits as a counselor, Mr. Spools. Counselor Bailey?
No, I think this is a great initiative. Do you know the timing on the printing of the posters? Could they bring some to the conference and sell them there?
We could definitely look into that. I know there's been a lot of work done already with the printing company, so I think they're in good shape, so.
Counselor Hurst?
I'm supportive. Good local idea to promote the community. I think it's a good signal from this council to support things like this.
Just for my understanding, Mrs. Sand, this is a one-time base budget increase, is that correct?
A portion of it is one time as it relates to the printing costs. For printing the poster, but the revenue is projected to be received, I believe, over a 6-year period, but Ms. Hoyt Fox, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right. So my question line is these one-time base budget increases, when we come to our 24 budget, does the one-time base budget amount be removed from the starting point for your, what are we in right now? Operating budget? Or does
Yes.
this money stay in?
No, it gets removed.
Okay. Good. So that's good, let's support it. What's the next one? Page 52, there it is. All right. Advertising costs associated with the heritage designations due to Bill 23.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is relating to the changes, of course, in Bill 23 to the Heritage Act, giving municipalities with listed or undesignated properties on their heritage register a period of 2 years to either designate those properties by bylaw, or they are removed from the list for a period of 5 years. So as council is aware, we have a heritage register that has 109 properties on it. One is now designated through bylaw, and we're in the appeal period for that property, as we're aware, 82 Queen Street. And the remaining properties are all undesignated status. So we have a large number of properties that need to be prioritized and looked at over this next 2-year span to determine if they are to be designated by council. So this base budget increase form is suggesting approximately 20 of these properties be prioritized, and we're looking at primarily the public properties, so schoolhouses, churches, those sort of structures to be first in line. Again, that was not a formal resolution coming out of the Heritage Committee, but it was a discussion that they had in the last term. If they were to prioritize, that's sort of how they would look at this. So there is a significant cost associated with designating properties. The advertising is just one small piece of it. So again, every time a property is looking to move from undesignated to designated, we have to follow the Heritage Act in terms of statutory notice requirements. So there are 2 notices that are required for every designation by law. So this is the cost here that we're looking at, around $11,000 for 20 properties. Now, this does not take into account the cost and time that would be needed to generate the heritage statements that are required under the act. So that's a separate piece, which is unknown at this time, just because we have such a large number of properties, and the work associated with it is just unknown with the tight timeframes under Bill 23. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there was a number that came through council questions as well, so.
Great, thank you. Councilor Goyette.
Just a question about, so this particular cost is for the advertising of 20 properties. And that is just for this year. So we're anticipating to designate 20 properties in 2023. Is that the goal, I guess?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the goal, if depending again on the information that we have on these properties, if it is sufficient, like we saw with 82 Queen Street, where a lot of that work had already been done by the committee, then the work to designate these 20 properties could potentially be done this year. I think that's the hope. That's the hope of having our heritage student. But again, without digging into the files a little bit more and finding out what that scope of work looks like, it's still a little unknown.
Okay. And then you spoke about not incorporating the sort of the cost of the additional time outside of, like, I think you said to prepare statements. I think that's what you said. Would that be the work of the heritage student, or does council need to be looking at a surprise in terms of the cost related to staff time to be doing that work as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the student's role would be, in my mind, to review the files. So I think in the first and into the second quarter of this year, a lot of the work would be working with the Heritage Committee to get that priority list together. That would bring us into the summer months where we would have that heritage student to actually start doing some of the work. And then depending on how that unfolds in the scope of work, there may be some additional work depending on the Heritage Committee's capacity as well.
Okay. In the meantime, I am supportive of the cost of the advertising, and I guess I would defer to the Heritage Committee to advise on how that should be prioritized.
Yes, I support going forward with the advertising. However, I've got a couple of questions on process. If one of these property owners says, yes, I want my property designated, do you still have to go through the advertising process?
To you, Mr. Chair, we do. The act doesn't speak to whether or not there's cooperation or agreement with the owner. The notice requirements are statutory regardless.
Okay, say we don't get through the whole list of 89 properties and we miss the cutoff, what happens then?
So through you, Mr. Chair, Bill 23 says that those properties that aren't designated within the time period are removed from the list. Staff have had discussions with our neighboring municipalities. Everyone's in kind of the same boat. And there has been discussion about if those properties are removed from the list, they are now at risk for demolition. They have no protection, no interim protection for a period of 5 years. But what staff could continue working on during that period of time before they can be added back in the 5 years would be to work towards a designation of those properties when the timeline permits. So they're removed from the list. It doesn't preclude staff from continuing to work, collect information, get them ready and prepared for when the timeline is available to add them as a designated property. So again, that would be looking 5 years out from when they're removed.
And in terms of hiring a consultant for this next batch of work, that would presumably be coming in next year's request.
To you, Mr. Chair. I think that the idea is that the first 20 properties staff would and the committee would try to look at doing internally. And then, like you said, Councillor Sipolis, in the next year, we may come forward with a better idea of what a consultant would cost for the remaining properties.
Fair, thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. So piggybacking on that line of questioning, if partway through 2023, we realize this is a lot more overwhelming or there's a higher need and we do need to get a consultant available, and maybe this question for Mary, are there any funds available for consultants that we can be tapping into currently?
No. This hasn't been budgeted for as part of the capital budget or the operating budget. There have been some funds budgeted as part of the capital budget as it relates to amendments to the parkland dedication bylaw and the development charges bylaw due to the changes in Bill 23. But the heritage components haven't been budgeted as it relates to the consulting costs.
And then I had asked a question just around whether there would be any support from the upper tier, and I'm just wondering if maybe Courtney, you can just comment on the response for that.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. So we did reach out to some of our member municipalities and talk some of this through with their staff. And at this time, no one is aware of any support through the upper tier. Again, the mandate for heritage preservation is placed on the lower tier municipalities through their heritage committees, as we are required under statute to have a heritage committee. But we can still continue to investigate all different funding options, grants, that sort of thing, to see what's out there.
So knowing that, this is only 20 properties we're talking about for this term, but if we were to take all the properties, I think the response was that we're looking at a $60,000 ticket item here to advertise all the properties. And I think that is astronomical for our township to try to fund. So I don't really know how we're going to go through this to preserve sort of the heritage we have. But anyway, I think starting with the 20 is a small piece, and we need to at least be starting the process. And so I fully support the 11,000 that's budgeted for this. I'm a little concerned that we're not going to be budgeting a little bit for a consultant that we may or may not need partway through this term.
Councillor Hurst.
I think this is a good start for the Heritage Committee moving into this calendar year. I think there's a lot of unknowns in terms of what Bill 23 can or may or may not do. So I think the questions I have been asked by the other councillors. I'm supportive of it. But I think it's a lot to be determined.
Thank you. I'm assuming that it's too late to take them off the list so that the clock didn't start ticking for the 2 years.
Correct.
It's yeah, and if we can find some alternative funding sources, that would be great. I feel that next year is going to be expensive, but now is probably not the place. But the Heritage Committee could maybe identify, the one-offs. Like if there's only one building left, and they have to prioritize which structures we designate because we might not be able to complete everything next year, which is unfortunate. But
Mr. Mayor, you raise a good point, to consider, but, you asked a question, can we take them off the list? Is that a definite, no, we can't take them off the list at this time? Because that was certainly, shorten down the, 5-year period.
so you can identify which ones are more priority, delist the other ones and
And then, exactly,
stretch it out.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Cebulos, if the way I read the legislation is that if we were to remove them from the list, the 5 years would still apply, but it wouldn't be 5 years out from 2024. It would be 5 years out from today.
okay, so perhaps we can ask the, this, Heritage Committee if that's an option they would want to consider. In other words, we're tight for time to try to get all 89 designated. And we'd like to pull it and maybe designate 50 of them and the other 50 we take off, and then at least you got instead of 5 years from 2024, it's 5 years from this year type of thing.
Yeah. When's the appropriate time to have those conversations? Is it now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will be bringing a staff report to council once we've met with our Heritage Committee for the first meeting, and perhaps we could bring a recommendation back after that.
Great help, that's super.
Okay, so I believe I heard we're supportive of the 11,000. All right, fire and rescue. We, Mr. Mulvey is here to give us a quick summary of this request. Chief Mulvey, I guess I should say.
Okay, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. This is the request for you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, the request is for an account to pay the volunteer firefighters to be on call. There is a policy in place that asks the firefighters to be on call, which means being in the area, being able to respond at any time. The idea is to pay them to provide this service. And not only does that make it easier for them to do the job, but it makes it much easier for us to hold them accountable. I read some comments, and most definitely this would come with an accountability or attendance policy for sure. I intend to enforce all policies, so I wouldn't let that be ongoing. Yeah, so basically it's based on $100 per firefighter for every time they're on call. There's 4 crews, so they'll be on call, I believe, 13 times a year. And that's what that money would be used for.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Mr. Gordon?
I don't really have any questions. I can support this. I can appreciate that. If someone has to stick around just in case that they're called, they should be compensated for that time, and hopefully that helps with some retention and, like you say, accountability. So I don't have an issue with it.
Councilor Spruce?
I'm fine in principle. The other concern I got is that we're tight budget wise. Is there an opportunity to start this, say, mid-year as opposed to beginning of the year?
The policy went into, sorry, the policy, through you, Mr. Chair, the policy was relaxed because of COVID, and I was happy to see that there was a policy in place, and I informed the members of Pushlands Fire that that policy would be back in force as of January 1. I would like to see the on-call start as of January 1.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering if you can clarify for me the suggestion or the it sounds to me like the on-call payment is correlated to attendance. So is this something to help fix an attendance problem that we're having, or is it just to kind of a token of appreciation and acknowledgement of what they're already doing?
I would say that this is going to, I'm not going to say fix a problem, but it's going to increase attendance. It's going to guarantee a response. And I don't think it's just something to say thank you. I think that they're getting paid for a service. And it is a policy that's widely used across the county. And $100 per firefighter is quite low. I've seen that number as high as $250.
I don't have any questions. I guess, again, backing on to Councillor Sepulveda's, if the numbers are tight, is there opportunity to somehow prioritize, if we were to cut this in half, you know, certain firefighters over a certain year on the force could be getting this, or I don't know. Has that conversation come up?
I think that there would be each firefighter's putting the same amount of effort into this, whether how many years of service they'd be on. So the fact that I'm not going to say they lose their freedom, but their freedom to go to a different city to do shopping or things like that, I think $100 is light, and it'd be well worthwhile.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hurst.
Two questions, or maybe one question, a two-parter. Fire Chief Mulvey, because you've had experience in other regions in addition to ours, how widespread is a similar policy with other departments within the county, in the sense of consistency and timing? And I guess the next question, or the follow-up question, is just for my own understanding, that the $100 is I'm assuming it's for a set period of time, where that particular firefighter has to be within the confines of the township. Is that just the policy in terms of how it works?
Yeah, that's correct. It's widely used across the county, and in other places that I work, like I said, that's $220, but that's for a 7-day period. The policy in Pushlinch is that they're on call for a weekend, then 1 night through the week. So that's why I was comfortable with dropping it down to $100. And yes, that's the idea, is that they'll be around and they will be responding to calls while they're on duty. And totally agree with the lieutenant's policy to make sure they're held accountable when they do that.
Thank you. I'll apologize in advance because I didn't provide these comments ahead of time, but they just came to me. Firstly, is there any OMERS impacts? We've had in the past some advocacy for OMERS for our part-time employees. Does paying them on call change their classification as far as the municipality or OMERS is concerned?
We had that question asked in Center Wellington because we have some municipal employees that also respond to fire, and no, it does not affect their OMERS.
Okay. So just enlighten me here. There's 10 firefighters who are going to be on call, so I assume that there's 10 firefighters per crew, and there's 4 crews.
Yeah, a minimum of 10, as long as we keep the numbers up, for sure.
Yeah, I guess with the staffing levels, I understand that. Is there multiple officers per crew or just one officer per crew?
The way the crews are formed right now is that there's an officer or a captain, an acting captain, and at least 1 or 2 DZ licensed operator to the pump.
Okay, so I'm gonna suggest this to you, and because of the rhetoric you're hearing out of here about budget concerns, is there a possibility to have half the crew on call per time? Because it's my understanding most of the calls are medicals, so 10 firefighters wouldn't even be enough for a house fire, but for a run-of-the-mill medical call, 5 would be fine. This would also give an opportunity for the staff to not be on call every month. You'd be able to alternate half the crew on call per month and thus reduce the cost of the municipality. So I'm supportive of the 11,000 as is, but I'd like council to consider requesting the chief to just take that report back on the next part of the budget. That if there is a possibility, it may not work. I don't know. Is that out of line, Mr. CAO?
We can have that discussion. We can report back at the next meeting for sure.
So if council's supportive of it, so what I'm saying is split the crew in half. That way they're only on call every other month. Now we give them some flexibility. I mean, I don't think they should be, if their crew's on call, they shouldn't be going to Florida, but at least they wouldn't have to be staying home. So that's maybe a component that would help retain our staff. And from my experience, when you have a big burn, a big accident, you're getting everybody, because that's what they want to go to. It's the alarm activation in the middle of the night, the medical calls, those are the tough ones to get staffing up, so. Just maybe turn that over to Cal, see what their thoughts are on that. I'll hear back from the chief.
I'm happy to hear back from staff on that. I'm definitely not experienced in the area of emergency response, so I don't want to suggest what should or should not be happening in terms of who should be on call and how many, but I'm happy to hear the report back.
And is January 18th too short a timeline for something like that?
No, I like your idea, Mr. Mayor. Certainly would support the report back instead.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, I'm happy to hear a report. Anything we can hear is just more understanding for me, so that's great.
Councilor Hurst?
Supported.
Sorry about that, chief.
That's all right. Your mayor, could I make one comment about that is the fact that the attendance policy doesn't count when that person's at their full-time employment on their regular hours of work. So it doesn't guarantee that you're getting 10 people. They would, the way the policy works in other places, that you give your hours of work for that week or that on-call period. And hopefully there's shift workers or people that are own their own business that you get the 5 people that you need to run that medical call or that alarm or the bells and stuff like that. So that's the intent of having all 10 on call.
I see. Fair enough. When they implemented this back in the day, when I worked for the fire department, we were responsible for finding coverage when we were at work, but that's obviously changed, but I look forward to seeing that in your report. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So that's supported till the 18th. I believe. Let's see. Corporate. The development and implementation of an organizational safety management system. Who would like to speak to that one?
Is there one?
Or did I miss one?
So, telephone.
Oh, sorry, the phone. Fire and rescue phone. Does
56.
anybody need to speak to that, or can we just? That's just.
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Really? Yeah, very good. All right, sorry about that. Now, the next one is the development and implementation of the organizational safety management. Is that?
Sure, I'll speak to that. So health and safety is obviously the critical component of the responsibility of the municipality to protect the employees in the workplace and everything that happens within the corporation. And it's one of the many duties that's assigned to each of the department heads. And with the multiple tasks that there are, sometimes they don't have the time to get to this, because there's always other urgent matters that come up or situations that need immediate attention. So what we want to do that doesn't negate the need for this to still be done. A need has been identified and it's a risk to the municipality, so it's my responsibility to inform you as council about it. And what we wanted to do is find a way to be able to undertake these tasks that are required, but to do it obviously in a fiscally responsible way. So that's why we propose to do it similar as a shared service type of undertaking, which has been a proven success for us in the past. That way it enables us to get a quality individual that's experienced that can provide these duties for us. And then they also have access to a whole team that can support them too. They're not just kind of a one-off in that corporation by themselves. So it's a good way to ensure that we have the proper process in place. We have the proper records. The risk that I mentioned, we don't want to be in a situation, should there be an injury or an investigation or even an audit, and the municipality be found lacking under the requirements of the legislation, then that puts you in a negative situation in terms of charges for sure. So we want to make sure that we're compliant with what the requirements are, and that we have the proper process in place to ensure that people are safe in the workplace. So we're doing it, we're proposing to do it as a shared service approach, and we're proposing to phase it in using some of those modernization funds that we receive through the province as well. So it's kind of a way to phase this in so that we can get these tasks done that are really a necessity for the corporation, and that protect the liability of the corporation, but also the personal liability of the department heads themselves, because should something happen, they're perfectly liable that charges placed against them too from the Ministry of Labor. So this is a good way to the best way that we can find it in a fiscally responsible way to get those tasks done.
Thank you, Mr. Seal. Councilor Goida.
Sorry, just writing some notes here. Yeah, so I completely agree that health and safety is an important component. An area of focus for the township. I like that there is a proposed sharing agreement here and also that there's grant funding available to reduce the impact this year. It just seems like such a big, huge chunk of money overall, like the $54,000 is a significant cost to be taking on over year. And I have to say that I maybe don't completely understand what that role entails. But I guess I just was wondering about, in my head, I'm imagining that a big undertaking for that person would be to write some policies and put some policies into place in terms of health and safety. And to me, and I could be wrong, that's not necessarily something that is ongoing all the time. Once the policies are written and in place, they're in place. It's not necessarily something that has to happen year over year over year. And so I was just wondering if there was any consideration to, it may not be an employee, but maybe a consultant to do that work kind of one and done. And then the next year, we just have, I don't know how it would go after that, but then it wouldn't be this $54,000 cost year over year over year. It maybe be a one-time shot. And I may be totally out of line in how I'm thinking about that, but I just felt it important to ask that question.
Sure, yeah, I can speak to that. I agree that the workload initially will be significant to develop and compile all these things and to consolidate the information that we've got. There is an ongoing cost as well to continue to update these because you have to, in the Ministry of Labor regulations, you have to show that you're reviewing these on an annual basis, or I don't know, maybe every 2 years, 3 years, whatever the stipulation is. So I fully agree that the initial startup might be bigger than the longer term requirement. So that's kind of the beauty of the shared service agreement, as well as there's a time frame associated with that. So we can get the program up and running, we can have the resources that we need to do it. And then as we assess it, maybe you look at year 2 or year 3 or whatever it might be, then we can assess and say, okay, if things are in place now, we can reduce that requirement. So then we can have the discussion with our shared service partner that, hey, our need isn't as much. Can we reduce the agreement from X to Y, if anything? So that's an added benefit too of, hiring your own employee, because then once you hire them, you can have them, right? So under the shared service, we have that ability to adjust the need should that be determined as a feasible option in the future.
Okay, so to me, that's a key piece of information that helps me make my decisions. Okay, thank you very much.
I suppose.
I support the principle. However, I have a question with respect to the 50-50 split. If you look at Central Wellington, they got must be at least 10 times employees we have. And I can understand a person 50% looking after something there, but for us, such a small number of people, is it justifiable 50%? Should it be something less than that, 30%?
My understanding is that they have the number of health and safety staff, and because of the growth that they've had in the municipality, they're adding to their health and safety team. So it's not as if this half a person would be providing all the services for their whole corporation. It's just a portion of their need. They already have other staff there that are performing these duties. So they have a need, but not for a full person. And we have a need not for full person. So those two pieces together add to a full person. Does that answer?
That does, thank you.
Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, I think I read, sorry, it was in the report or in one of the questions. The idea around a part-time, like posting for a part-time person to be doing this. And it was suggested that was a second option or something, but if that option was available, how would it impact the cost of the person? Would it be a lesser amount, or would it?
I don't think it would be really, because in reality, I think it might be a higher cost, because someone might be doing it as a semi-retired person from the health and safety field. They do it as a consulting assignment on the side kind of thing. And I would think that their hourly rate you could anticipate to be higher than if it would be a employee that works at a municipality that's shared, right? Okay.
and just for confirmation, this is an employee position, not a contract position.
Correct.
Great.
Correct, but it would be through a contract for a shared service so that we would have the ability to adjust the time frame requirements itself.
So it's got that built-in flexibility. Great component. And I guess, again, it's probably a repeated question, but Councillor Spillis was asking about the cost split. And again, I was just wondering if there was opportunity for more of a weighted capacity based on employees. So if you said Center Wellington had, 70% of employees, we had 30. Is there a way to slide that scale a little bit for the cost of the employee?
If it would be the only person providing the services for both municipalities, I think yes, but they have other people doing it. Like this person isn't the only one providing those duties for Center Wellington. There's other people in their staff team already doing that. They just, because of their growth, they have an additional need. So this is an addition to their team. So this person, like you said, will be providing equal service to both. They're covering the whole municipality in both cases. They're only going to be covering a portion of Center Wellington.
Okay, so then a follow-up question. Right now, the department heads are covering a lot of this documentation and things. Are they able to tap into what is already happening in Center Wellington or other municipalities? For
Our
that
existing
assistance?
staff or this
Yeah,
person?
our existing staff.
Our existing staff are doing what they can with the information and documentation that they have been able to get through various training programs or through their peers. But this, similar to our HR agreement, would be that, processes and documents and policies that are developed elsewhere can easily be transferred here, similar to what we're doing in the fire situation as well. So it will help share the effort and stop duplication, things like that. Like, but basically just sharing documentation that has already been prepared.
And then Mary, just for clarification, so this year, the ask is for, or the amount is a $16,000. But then next year, we would expect to see 54 without any grant opportunity or with any other modernization funding.
So there is a building component. So a component of the cost will be funded by the building reserve on a year-over-year basis. So I'm just I'm just opening up the capital budget sheet.
I think it says about $10,000 would be charged to building on an ongoing basis, so it wouldn't. My guess is, it wouldn't be 54, it would be 10 less than that, right? Roughly.
Yep, exactly. 11 less than that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hurst?
Yeah, a couple comments, I think. Sharing some of my day job aspects, the health and safety and regulatory requirements they're an obligation of any organization now. So I think I'm appreciative of staff identifying this. And I think as organizations grow and mature and scale, health and safety evolves as well, in the sense of it goes from a portion of somebody's job remit, which I think is what has happened now, to evolving to a safety specialist. And I think to me, that's a good strategic sign of growing communities, that they resource with the appropriate people with the appropriate skill set to perform their job. So it's kind of my first comment. I think the second is kudos to township staff when we can engage in shared service agreements. I think that is a net win for everybody. You can take the knowledge gained in another municipality and share that with ours. I think it's really important. So I think I'm supportive of this. I think the only build I would have is after the initial work phase of documentation and getting all the policy and procedures up to speed, I'd encourage staff to reevaluate the shared service agreement to similar comments. And is that 54 number the right number, or does it need to be modified in the future based on the workload? But I think I do see the value of a shared employee, because you gain all the experience of another municipality and bring it to this municipality. And honestly, like, I'll share my business insight into this. Like, for me, if I was hiring somebody and I said 54,000, I'd say double or 3x it for a really good health and safety person. So I think if you're looking for value for money, as somebody that deals with this more on a day-to-day basis, I'm not getting a ton of sticker shock.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important that municipality update their policies, because if we get one individual hurt, and we don't have a policy in place, the cost is going to be, never mind the human cost, but the cost of the municipality is going to be way more than this. The only thing I would suggest is, and it's kind of been the common denominator of my comments is, once we know all the numbers, that we take a look at using some of the, forget the terminology, but there's some existing growth numbers that may be coming in. Because my concern for budgets is next year. We've seen it in Mary's reports on consents is being budgeted at a very conservative 3 consents going forward. Our chief building official mentioned that building permits are down. We're gonna see all those impacts next year. So if we can take some of our growth from this year to lessen the hit on this item, I'd like staff to just consider that for the 18th. Other than that, I'm supportive of it. So if there's any other comments.
Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to understand your logic here. You're saying some of the growth numbers, are you saying we take it, not have it fund from the modernization, but put it in the operating?
Depending on the growth numbers that I
Yeah,
see on the
obviously.
18th, just because I'm really concerned about next year's
Okay,
budget.
that makes sense. That's clear. And I just want a clarification from Mary on the numbers. The way I have the numbers, next year's will be only 38,000 because we already have the 16 in the budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we're looking at 38.
Well, actually, it'll be less than that. Sorry, 1 second. I believe it'll be 27,000 if you incorporate the building surplus reserve amount as well, because the 54,111 includes the building allocation.
Okay,
So-
I took off 10, that's 44, and I took off 16, I get 28, you're right. Okay.
I just like staff's opinion.
Yeah,
They might still decide.
So we're looking at 28,000, Mr. Mayor.
So that could be half a point in 24. I believe that's the last BBI, correct? So I believe we need to go to the top, page 2. Staff need direction on the Cambridge Fire Services contract. Is that the last outstanding item, Mrs. Sand?
Yes, thank you.
Question, Mr. CAO, I believe it was this year you implemented the you queried council about what they'd like to see in the budget going forward, correct? Could we move this item off? I know there was a resolution from 2020, but council's been pretty cognizant of the current environment with inflation. I'd like to see this just move to that query when it goes out to council members, and it could be a simple, is there an interest in absorbing more of the Cambridge contract, and you would be able to get a consensus from council versus it being on here? Is there any interest in that? I feel just if it comes in front of us and we're in a tough budget here, it puts us in a tough spot. So I think we've done a good job of absorbing it right now. There's still a lot of things up in the air with the fire service, whether we're building second station still in the asset management plan. There's a lot of things unknown. So to me, I feel it could be addressed earlier in the budget process versus in the middle or near the end. Thoughts on that from council. Councilor Goyda?
Yeah, like, just to clarify, you're speaking of when we do the, like the budget, when we all answer the individual
Yeah.
questions about the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be happy to do it at that time as well.
Councilor Schools?
I'd like to keep it front and center. It's a point that's a sticking point with some residents, and I think to try to bury it by not having front and center, I think is doesn't look good on us. To me, it's right front and center. We make a conscious decision, yay or nay. We get all kinds of requests that we make yay or nay, and I don't see this any different than one of those.
Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've given direction that then got sidetracked a bit because of COVID. So there's a lot of, whether we want to contribute or not, does depend on, situations that are happening and how the budget is looking. So I'm not sure if what we say early on you know, if you said, yeah, sure, I'd love to contribute early on, but then we look at some numbers and realize it might change what we're deciding anyway. So I feel like you need a little bit of the puzzle before we're committing.
So your status quo is what you're
So
like.
I'm thinking leave it where it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
Councillor Hurst.
This is my first budget cycle, so I will leave it to my more experienced colleagues how it is best presented.
Sounds for the most part, I'm not gonna divide the council order, so it sounds for the most part, you can stay there. So we need to make a choice or a decision for staff, if there's any desire to increase the amount of the Cambridge contract, to be absorbed by the rest of the taxpayers. Councillor Goida?
Well, I'd like to say that I do support the continuous gradual phasing in of this contract to the 50%. I guess to your point, it seems like it doesn't seem to matter. We always end up having one last thing when we're talking about the budget, and it's like that one last thing, like, can we do it? Can we not? And this happens to be that thing this time. I think, you know, we were on a path to phase it into that 50% mark. And then with the uncertainty that COVID brought, that kind of came to a pause, but I think that we need to make that decision. Like, are we going to continue on that path, or are we just going to stop? And to me, I think we should continue on that path. Given the uncertainty of where numbers are falling and what the growth is going to be. I would personally like to defer that decision until the next meeting when we know what those numbers are going to be. But if it's, you know, imperative that we make that decision today, then I would like to further phase in something.
Schools?
I agree, we should be moving to reduce it. I agree with Councilor Goida, we should try to see what we can figure out what we can do at the next meeting rather than pushing it at this meeting. I think it's we've held off on a lot of other items. Previous discussions today. I think this is another one we held off, and we'll look at the total impact and the growth numbers and whatever other numbers are coming in, and we can make a learned decision. But that's the frustrating part of this process. You're not getting the whole picture until the very end, and you, as Councilor Goida and Bailey said, you know, you want to do the right thing, but you don't have the right information to do it at the right time.
Councillor Bailey?
Thank you. So in some of the questions that I had asked to staff, and maybe Mary can help me confirm what I've written down here. But originally, I think council had given direction to try to have the contribution by 50% by 2024. COVID seemed to delay us a couple years. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, maybe we take that 2 years now and we'd like to be 50% by 2026. So I think the calculation that Mary helped me with was that if we were to do that, it would change. I've written down 5,705 each year to get us to 2026. So Mary, I guess I'm just looking for confirmation. Can you let me know what we would need to be adding each year to get us to 50% by 2026 of what the contract is today, or the predicted to 2026?
Councillor Bailey, did you say 5,705? I believe one of the questions that came out that was circulated was what would be the amount to bring the contribution up to 50% of the contract amount to the 2024 budget? So the question now is, what would that be to the 2026 budget, correct?
Right. Yeah.
I believe it would be approximately $5,705 per year.
So I was going to suggest that maybe we put that in as a little marker today. And then we can also see on the 18th, you know, how that impacts it, what we have to work with.
I can handle 5 grand.
Yeah.
Councillor Hurst?
I'm supportive of Councillor Goida's suggestion to have a robust discussion in the 18th.
Yes, one thing I feel about this contract is that I want to choose my words carefully, but the residents in that area receive different service. So, with Cambridge responding, no, actually, I'll hold on, this Chief Mulvey, Cambridge First Response, is it for medical calls as well, or just structure fires?
I believe it's just structure fires.
Okay.
It's a,
So-
yeah, New Dundee's involved as well, but it's just structure fires.
Yes, I'm comfortable with it being a copay. Our first discussions under 2018 were to absorb the entire amount. But there is a different response from a full-time department for the first hour versus the rest of our residents. So we're a partner in this agreement with the residents. So I like Councillor Bailey's suggestion that, to go to 26. So we'll hear back from staff on the 18th on that. I think that's likely doable. But I will say, I didn't recognize it'd only be 5,000, but we still have a commitment we made to the public about our gravel roads. And, if I were to have to choose between something that serves a certain number of individuals versus serves the entire community, I would probably lean towards the gravel roads. Now hearing $5,000, I think that's something we might be able to do. So I look forward to that discussion on the 18th. So we'll defer that one, Mr. Sand. Is that the last item you need clarity on?
Yes.
Is there a resolution for that?
Mr. Mayor, there's a couple other budget.
Oh, yeah, I guess we should go through all the budget pages.
It's not so, I got two items on.
What I'll do is I'll go to each council member and ask them if they have other items they want to speak to. So Councilor Goy, is there any other items that we haven't discussed?
The only other, sorry, I just have to find out where I wrote this down. I'm sorry.
You know what I'll do is I'll just go out of order if that's okay with you, and I'll.
Sorry,
Councilor
I
Spills
just
ready to
lost
go
my
up too.
place here.
Councilor Spills.
I'm looking at staffing. We know that there's some staff are leaving. And it's gonna take a bit of time to bring new staff in to replace them. Is there an opportunity for some savings by gapping?
Yes, we have received notice of the resignation, and we've already started the recruitment process for that. So I would anticipate that the period where we won't have an individual in that role would be somewhere in the matter of weeks to maybe a month. I don't think it would be much longer than that. So I'm not sure that it's going to be really beneficial to cut the budget too much. If it was a situation where, yeah, we anticipate, there's gonna be 4 or 5, 6 months where someone's not gonna be in the role, for sure, we would bring forward a recommendation, but this situation, this particular circumstance, I don't think we'll be in that situation.
Yeah, I'm saying even a month out of say 100,000 all in type of thing, that's still
Can I chime in? Typically what do they call, what's the term? When
Gapping.
Phil, sorry, gapping but that would end up just being shown as a budget surplus or absorbed by any negative component in the budget. So what I'm saying is, right, so we're trying to save some money, but we wouldn't necessarily see it on this budget. You just see it at the end of the year as,
And then the potential concern associated with that then is then would that not reflect as an increase in the following year, right? Which would be tough, right?
So I think what the question is, not that I'm suggesting this, because if you defer the filling of the position, but kept the money in the budget until, say, halfway through the year, you would save half the salary, half the benefits, then that would offset our troubles here, but then you would have to operate down a staffer for 6 months.
Correct.
So maybe you could speak to that, like, is that kind of where you're?
Well, I'm only looking at what's a reasonable number, and I'm looking at right now, the CEO said about a month, and I'm saying, okay, a month of $100,000, that's still 1/12 of that, or roughly $9,000. That's a good chunk of change.
But are you suggesting cutting the budget or just using that money in to offset increase, or how are you?
Offset the increases. I understand what you're saying, it's gonna be extra 9 next year, but at the same time, I'm looking at this year. So that's a consideration I'd like to think about for the 18th as an option. Again, I don't know how the numbers are gonna stack up, but it's important that we have all the cards on the table to look at, to which card we want to play to reduce the number of what becomes a significant number.
The 18th takes us 2 weeks, so you'd be, how far along in the recruitment process are you gonna be by then?
I don't, offhand, I can't tell you what the closing days, do you
The
know?
13th of January is the closing date, so.
Yes, okay, that's fine.
So that gives. Okay.
The other question I have, it's not in the budget sheets. We've been having meetings here. And the suggestion is that we go back to the offices. Now, my understanding is that staff are using those offices, and in order to go back to those offices, we'd have to put them in trailers.
Or do the admin center upgrade.
I don't know, but there's a cost associated with either way you're doing it, and if that's the case, I think we should know what those costs are before we make the move.
Or at least see a report on options. If admin doesn't go forward, then this is what we have to do.
I don't have a concern either way, as long as we go into this with wide eyes open and we make the decision on that basis rather than saying, oh yeah, let's go back without understanding the full ramifications. So what I'd like to suggest is staff come back with a report for the next meeting. Is that possible to identify the costs associated? I'm not looking at a full-blown report, just say,
Yeah, I
you
can
want
come up
this?
with some estimates for
yeah,
sure.
exactly, yeah.
When do we receive any update on the proposed expansion of the admin center?
The RFP is probably going to be issued in about, I'm gonna say within the next week or so. And then that'll be out to the consultants typically for three to 4 weeks. So then we'll have a report coming back to council that, here's the results of the RFP, the design work, and cost projections are gonna cost approximately X. Council can then decide to award that work, then the people will start their work. So the reality of you having information, the facility expansion or whatever option is proceeded with, some cost projections for that, I would say optimistically would be sometime mid-late summer.
Okay, so then I think the report that you're speaking of should accompany that. Because if the admin expansion is not supported, then this is the cost to get us back into our proper chambers. Because we need another option. If we don't do the expansion, then this is where we're staying.
Well, just so I understand, was your question on associated with the expansion of the facility, or is it for right now?
For right now,
I can wait till.
you can wait.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine. And I'll withdraw the question.
so I would like to see though, because I'm pretty certain it's gonna be a fairly large ticket item for the expansion. And if it's something that council and myself can't support, then we need to know what the other option is to get us back into a proper chambers.
That's fine, Mr.
So-
Mayor. I thought there was some urgency. If there isn't. That's
On
fine.
support.
Okay, the last question I've got is to do with the revenue from aggregates. Right now, I understand is we take a 10-year average and determine that that's the proposed revenue for the current year. I was wondering if our finance manager can talk to a little bit on the logic associated with that, rather than say taking the last 5 years as opposed to do 10 years, because that certainly will reduce the amount of levy if we take 5 years versus 10 years.
Yes, Councillor Sapoulis. So in the past, we have looked at, as part of our report to council at the December 7th meeting, I included an analysis of the aggregate shipments from 2013 to 2021. And in that analysis, the aggregate shipments range from 3.5 million in 2013 to 4.6 million in 2021. The amounts each year also change as well. And as we all know, aggregate production is how the township obtains the license fees collected from the Ontario Aggregate Resources Corporation. The amount is 12 cents per ton of aggregate shipment. And so the shipments have ranged significantly from year to year, and we don't have control over how much aggregate has shipped. So that's why we've used a higher average. However, it is up to council to determine if you'd like a lower year range be incorporated. It's just aggregate shipment is something that is hard to predict as well.
I guess I'd like to have that as a tool for the January 18th. In other words, consideration what the impact would be if we went to 5-year. This is assuming that we got all kinds of budget constraints we're trying to whittle down. I'm not saying we do it today. I'm not saying we do it on the 18th, but what if?
Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe the first to say, I'm not understanding what you're talking about.
I can speak.
Sure.
I think what Councilor Poulos is saying is that the amount of revenue that's projected in the budget right now, based on the policy or the practice that we've taken to this point, is estimated based on the 10-year average. And previous years, in the earlier portion of those 10 years, the numbers were lower. The last 3 to 5 years, the annual production rates have been considerably higher. So if we are in a situation where we have a budget concern, where we're looking for additional revenues, I think what he's suggesting is that maybe it might be more appropriate for us to incorporate a higher number as a projection for the number we're going to be getting from TOR, just based on the last 3 to 5 years average instead of the 10-year, because that might be more reflective. So, and then I think what Mary's trying to say is that we can do that. There's just a little bit more risk associated with that, because what if production numbers aren't as high as what it has been over the past 3 years? So it's just kind of what's council comfortable with. You want to, have a little bit more protection and have a 10-year average, or do you want to try and help what your numbers are in the budget and then project a higher number? The risk associated with projecting too higher a number is that if you project a high number, the economy takes a downturn or whatever, production values go down, then you don't want to be in a deficit situation with funding your operating budget. So,
Mr. Mayor, to be clear, 2022, the budget was $480,000 revenue. We're sitting at about $599,000 revenue. The actuals for 2021 were $583,000. The actuals for 2020 were $524,000. So you can see we're considerably over the $492,000 that we're budgeting. All we're doing is increasing the 2022 number of $480,000 to $492,000, only $12,000, and yet we have all this other potential income. So I'm saying, I'm not asking for a decision. I'm saying let's have it on the table, and if it's if it is a concern, we can look at it some way reducing the cost.
A bigger question to me is, where does the money go when you hit short? Does it just go part of the surplus and then into the asset management plan, or where does that money end up?
Yes, so that money does go into the surplus and it goes into the asset management reserve, or however council directs as part of our annual surplus report that we do to council, that we provide to council.
Well, in that report that you're going to provide, if you could, you're going to be busy typing. Could you indicate how much of the previous, wherever Councilor Poulos, 5-year window of our surplus was actually the aggregate component of it? Because that's essentially a grant, right? That could run out. Now, we've all heard it from the aggregate producers that they're running out of gravel, they're going to leave, they never leave. But apparently Dufferin is on a 4-year window to leave. So, we have to be cognizant of those situations in the environment. And as the CEO mentioned, they could, if the economy takes a dive, they could close the plants. And that came up in the aggregate appeals. What stage are they at now? I don't know what it's anyways, part of their argument was about paying industrial taxes. They mothballed the Aberfoyle pit for I forget what they said, 5 or 8 years. So then that production would just disappear. So it's just bigger. It's a lot of conversation.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't want staff to go with a big elaborate report. I just want to have this as a tool to say, yes, we'll draw on it or we won't draw on it.
Mhm.
It all depends on the growth numbers we got coming back and what other numbers coming back. So it's something to consider. It's not something to implement right now.
Yeah, I agree. But I also like to see what portion of our surpluses was that shooting short on the aggregate levy. Because that's essentially that's funding our asset management.
That's fine.
Do you have another?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Councilor Bailey?
Thank you. I just had a question in regards to the revenue for, and it was combining the ORC, the parks and PCC. We've committed a bit of money to increasing advertising to our facilities. And so I'm just wondering, does the budgeted 2023 revenues for those facilities kind of take into account the increase in usage based on this advertising?
Councillor Bailey, because the program is very new, I would prefer that we look into what the actuals are in 2022 and 2023 and account for that in future budget years. That's how we usually account for revenues in our facilities, just so that we have realistic amounts in there.
Okay, and I know you probably don't know this, but if we had, say, maximum 100% rental of all the facilities, how would that change what the projected revenue would be? Like, is this based on a 70% rental, 60%?
No, so the reason, I believe in the report, I included some information about how much our facility recoveries have increased in the 2023 proposed budget compared to previous year budgets, just because of the reopening of facilities due to COVID. So the amount of the increase is 56,000 amongst all three of our the ORC, the PCC and our parks. And so that's been accounted for, and it's based on pre-COVID levels. But I do recommend that we look into what our actuals are over the next couple of years, and we can adjust for it further.
Okay, great. 'Cause it'd be nice to see those numbers going up a bit more. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Hurst?
I have no comments. This is my first budget cycle, so I'm just trying to read as much as I can. I do appreciate the depth that staff go through.
In council. Right?
That's-
Last comment, Mrs. Saint, oh, sorry. I forgot, because I was supposed to start with you and then
It's okay.
Councilor Gordon.
The only one, I guess, comment that I had was, I mean, one of the questions that we had posed to staff in advance, there was a suggestion, or I guess maybe a comment by staff that if there are some worries about what our end levy number was going to be, that an option for council to consider was for base budget increases that are proposed to be one-time base budget increases to possibly be funded by the surplus. And I know we don't know what that number is yet. But the one thing I wanted to just inquire about is we have an additional amount being contributed to our insurance contingency this year, an additional amount of 15,000. And that is to adequately cover the deductible should there be a claim. However, if there isn't a claim this year, then that reserve would remain adequate and not likely need that $15,000 additional contribution next year. So it has kind of the potential to being a one-time increase as opposed to a permanent one. And so I was just wondering if it comes to that and we're looking at the numbers and we're really trying to save some money, if that is an area we could consider funding through the surplus as opposed to the operating levy. I guess that's a question maybe from Mary.
Yes, so the proposal is 25,000 per year based on our current deductible of 50,000. Since it's going to be a per year, like a per year proposed amount, I don't really recommend that we decrease that contribution just because our deductible is 50,000. And if there's a certain year that unfortunately, if we have a couple of claims, then that reserve can be completely depleted. But I'll let our CAO also talk about that if he'd like to add to that.
I would, just echo what, Mrs. Hand just said, given the potential risk of if you have a bad year, right? One or two claims, and it's not uncommon to have one or two claims. We've been very, very fortunate the last little bit, but if you don't continue to contribute to that, then you're going to be in a bad way. We obviously would take a different look at that if we had a considerably higher amount in that reserve, but I don't think we're at that point yet, that if we have a bad year, that it's not going to be completely depleted. So
Okay.
it's a little bit early at this point. At some point, yes, but I think it's a little bit early right now.
Agreed.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a follow-up question on that? Mary, the fact that we're going to be next year, 10 years without a major accident, is that going to drive the numbers down considerably for insurance?
Yes, I believe we reported on this as part of our insurance renewal report. I believe the 10-year mark is in 2024, and that's when we would start working on an RFP that would be effective January 1st, 2025 renewal. But Mr. CAO, please add to that.
Yeah, that's what the, let me say this. That's what the insurance companies have said as a potential outcome. It would likely, you know, depending on the situation of the time and all that, it's not a guarantee that yes, it will. They considered at the time, before what they used to do was it was a 5-year time period. And then it switched to the 10 years. So if they happen, the insurance industry happened to change that to longer than 10-year, then we're still in the same boat. So based on the information we have right now, possibly, but there's absolutely no guarantees that it will.
Thank you.
Along that question, at what point can a municipality be self-insured? And how much money would you need in the bank? Or could you go to, I don't know, RBC or somebody and secure a giant line of credit? And then, you know, obviously self-insure. I think, I don't know, and one of the municipalities I worked for, I believe, had that option. Is that something we could look at if our rates continue to?
We could look at it. I'm not sure that you're anywhere near a point where you'd be in the financial situation to be able to do that, but we could look at just, you know, high level, what threshold would we need to get to, and what financial resources would we need? Typically, from my experience, it's been, you know, the province and very large municipalities. I'm not sure many small municipalities have the resources to be able to do that. Because essentially what's going to happen is the reason the province and large municipalities can do it is they have enough money in reserves and things to be able to fund that should they get a large claim. We don't. So if you would want to go to a financial institution and say we want a line of credit in the event of, the reasonable expectation would be that they would want the same assurances that any insurance company would want, right? So we could look at it to see, but I'm not sure we're near a stage where we can do that.
Right. And my last question is for Mrs. Sandler, Mr. CEO. So we have a large component of the aggregate levy being used in the operating budget, and staff have been doing a wonderful job of trying to move that out of operating. Is there not a way that just money that's in the capital budget could be offset with the operating? So I'm just saying, on paper, things could be moved so that I get that it all goes into one pocket eventually, but on paper, could we not be showing that levy in the capital side and something from capital on the operating, and then that way it's out of the operating budget entirely?
The aggregate levy is a little bit unique because it's money that we receive in our operating. So as part of audit purposes, we're required to record it in our operating budget, and then we're required to transfer the amount that we've indicated we're going to transfer to the capital budget by transferring it to the aggregate levy discretionary reserve. So I can't really think of how to resolve that just based on audit requirements.
Okay, I feel that other municipalities have managed to do that, but I'll do some inquiry maybe, and I'll contact you offline. Or
Okay.
Mr. CEO. Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? Any budget items? Is there anything I've missed in staff's perspective. Thank you. Good. Great, we have a resolution.
Mr. Chair, would be helpful if I put it on the screen. It's a little bit lengthy, or just read it out. Or both.
Neither here nor there on that one.
Okay,
Maybe put it up.
Yeah.
Need glasses.
Is that a bit better?
My eyes are reaching the age.
That report FIN 2022-040 regarding the 2023 proposed operating budget be received. And that the parks outdoor maintenance base budget increase of $3,000 be approved, and that staff report back on whether it should be funded by the 2022 surplus, parkland dedication if legislatively permitted, or a permanent base budget increase. And that the Heritage Advisory Committee National Trust Conference base budget increase of $3,310 be tentatively approved, dependent on the final tax levy impact report at the January 18th, 2023 council meeting, with an option to have only one citizen member attend. And that the fire and rescue service on-call payments be approved, with staff reporting back on the financial implications of other options for the fire and rescue on-call schedule. And the council determine whether further costs associated with the Cambridge Fire Services contract should be phased in the 2023 operating budget to be funded by taxation levy, dependent on the final tax levy impact reported at the January 18th, 2023 council meeting. And that staff report back on potential expenditure decreases associated with the vacancy in the administration department. And the council directs staff to report back at the January 18th, 2023 council meeting regarding the possibility to incorporate the projected aggregate levy shipment contribution in the budget model based on a 5-year average rather than a 10-year average. And the council approves the 2023 permanent base budget increases amounting to $25,303 as outlined below.
That's it. Nice work. Can you move that, please? Councilor Goyda, second by Councilor Spools. Any further questions or comments? Staff? No? Okay, all in favor? It's carried. All right, confirmatory bylaw. Oh, yep, take as much time as you need.
That the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2023-001, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Westland held that it on its meeting held on the 5th day of January 2023.
Mover for that, Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst. All in favor? Carried. And adjourned in this 5 minutes.
Council hereby adjourns 2:14 p.m.
Move for that, Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Goyda.
Sure.
All in favor? Hey, sleep it over.
I was paying attention.
Great job, everyone.
Testing how bad my eyes really are.